Hey everyone, Jason Teichner here, a certified holistic health practitioner, nutritionist, hypnotherapist. So, wanted to talk about a huge issue that many people have, and I know that you've all heard it before, several times over the last several years, but it is definitely an epidemic. Right now, especially with all of the stressors going on in people's lives. And this is a condition, a digestive condition that is majorly aggravated by stress. Now, there's got to be a physical component as well. So, stress on its own doesn't cause it, but it's a major aggravator. Sure, a lot of you already know I'm talking about IBS, Irritable Bowel Syndrome. Huge problem in today's world. And again, a combination of stress and also the foods that we eat. So, first of all, why is stress a major contributor to IBS? Well, we have a communication that happens between the brain and the digestive system, right? It's called the gut-brain connection, and what happens is the brain gets signals from the gut gets signals from the brain, and then what happens is our body cannot process, digest, metabolize food because over 80%, and there different people say different numbers, but it's definitely over 80% of our serotonin is located in the gut. So that's why we call our gut our second brain. So when our neurotransmitters are not functioning properly in the gut, of course, it's going to cause major issues. Just like when we don't have enough of certain neurotransmitters in the brain, it causes major brain issues, right? It can cause depression, cause anxiety, it can cause brain fog, eventually leading to dementia type conditions as we get older. So what happens in the brain with lack of proper neurotransmitters functioning is the same thing that happens in the gut. And this is why stress is a huge factor of IBS. And so the foods that we eat are also extremely important, and the foods that we avoid are extremely important in IBS. And I don't have time to go over all of those foods with people. Plus, everyone's a little different as far as what types of foods they are sensitive to. So, unfortunately, IBS, or again, irritable bowel syndrome, is a diagnosis of omission, right? It's a syndrome, right? Irritable bowel syndrome. Now, what is a syndrome? A syndrome is a condition to where we do not know the cause. Well, I should say doctors doctors don't know the cause. As a holistic health practitioner, I do know the cause, and that's something that we can talk about further. But if you go to a gastroenterologist or GI doctor, if they cannot find anything wrong with you based on certain tests that they'll do, and there's quite a number of them they'll do depending on what your symptoms are and that kind of thing, and anything from an endoscopy down the throat to a colonoscopy, to a H. pylori test, all different types of tests they'll do. And if they find that things are, in their words, normal, right, then they'll usually give an omission diagnosis, meaning they cannot figure out what's going on. They'll give an omission diagnosis of IBS. And so obviously that's a problem because we want to know what's causing it, right? We don't so much care about the diagnosis as much as we care about what's causing it. IBS in and of itself is not a causal condition. There are things that cause, and again, stress, major aggravator of it, but there are certain things that cause IBS, and it's usually the types of foods that we're eating that we are sensitive to that eventually creates problems in the digestive system. So, and IBS is mostly function in the colon, where the colon is having issues. Now we can have IBS-D, which is IBS with diarrhea. We can have IBS-C, which is IBS with constipation, or we can have a mix, right, where you're going back and forth between constipation and diarrhea. Now, there is one very well-known cause in holistic medicine, which we call leaky gut syndrome, right? And a lot of people, most people watching this video have heard of leaky gut syndrome. Many of you watching this video have leaky gut syndrome. It is a big problem, and what causes that is, again, over time, eating the wrong foods for your particular system, which wreaks havoc in the digestive system, eventually tears the lining, and then we have the toxins of the food leaking into the bloodstream, and that's where we get leaky gut. Now, if you ask a regular doctor about this, most of them will say, oh, that's crap, there's no such thing as leaky gut, blah, 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 blah. Well, obviously don't believe them. And the way we know this is because if you go, which I suggest all of you do, if you go to a naturopathic doctor that does what's called a live blood analysis, I would suggest you all get that. It's called a live blood analysis. That will show certain types of inflammatory markers and toxins in the blood that are indicative of leaky gut. And also, depending on what other types of toxins or inflammatory markers are found in your blood sample from live blood sample, it will show other things that could be going on in your digestive system as well as in your body, such as bacteria floating around, such as a dormant virus that we haven't really gotten rid of, such as a fungus, such as a parasite. So it's going to show all of those things. It's a great test to do. Most naturopaths charge anywhere between $100 and $200 for it, so it's pretty reasonable. And so I would find one that does that. So that'll show if this IBS that you have is being caused by leaky gut syndrome, and there's ways that we can fix that. Now, if it's just IBS, before you really know what the cause is and you just want to kind of calm down the IBS, kind of get over the current flare-up that you're having, there's a few ways that we can do this. Number one is there's a ton of scientific studies on peppermint oil. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to take 0.4 milliliters of peppermint oil. It's going to be in a capsule, and we want to take that 3 times a day. Now I'm going to link a product that I recommend to you. Now, if it's just mild IBS, if it's just mild symptoms you're having, you could get away with taking 0.2 milliliters of peppermint oil, and take that 3 times a day. You'll know you'll see a significant difference in 2 weeks. Significant difference in 2 weeks. And you do not want to take it for more than 4 weeks at a time. Why? Because peppermint oil has a compound called menthol, and we do not want to take menthol, all the time, because it is a toxin to our body if we take it over a long period of time. So we only take it 4 weeks at a time, but that's plenty of time to get rid of your current flare-up. And then if you have another flare-up down the line, a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, 6 months later, whatever it is, you can go through that cycle of taking that peppermint oil once again, for 4 weeks and then stopping. Again, we don't want to take it all the time. Now, what that does is it really calms the digestive system so that you don't get the flare-up. It helps reduce the inflammation. It also acts as what's called an antispasmodic, so that you don't your bowel basically doesn't spaz out and continue to create those symptoms. So what are those symptoms? They could be anything from nausea to acid reflux, to bloating, full feeling, constantly feeling full even though you haven't eaten, maybe getting sick or tired or feeling full after just a couple bites of food, Those are all common symptoms of IBS. However, when your digestive system is off, don't be surprised if the IBS also causes things like dizziness, lightheadedness, fatigue, because again, the digestive system is very closely related to the brain. So you're going to have those brain issues as well a lot of times, depending on how bad this particular flare-up is that you're having. Now, what can we do besides peppermint oil that's more of a healer of IBS? We can do a couple things. We can do aloe vera juice. Now, so aloe vera juice, what that does is it brings a lot more oxygen into the digestive system and acts as a digestive anti-inflammatory at the same time. So depending on, and I'll put a couple links in there, but depending on which brand you get depends on how much you're going to want to take. Now, unlike peppermint oil, aloe vera juice you can take all the time, as long as it is not a whole plant, with the exception of one company called Aloe Life that really filters their aloe extremely well to take out what are the compounds called aloins. And these aloins are what, if you do aloe for a long time, that's when, like in the latex aloe and things like that, meant as a short-term solution for constipation. Reason it's not long-term is because those aloins can eventually tear up the digestive system, so we don't want that. And that's what we find in whole leaf aloe, but we don't find in interleaf aloe, with the exception of a brand, Aloe Life, which I'll link below. That one is okay to do whole leaf all the time because of how they filter it. So you're going to do, depending on which one you get, with Aloe Life, you're going to do 2 ounces 3 times a day on an empty stomach. You're going to do that for 8 weeks, and then you're just going to do 2 ounces a day as a maintenance, and your IBS should not come back if you do that with aloe. But again, there's a lot of brands of aloe juice, and you don't just want to grab any brand, because number one, a lot of them add a lot of water. You'd have to literally drink like half the bottle for it to make any difference, and also they don't filter it properly. So you got to be careful with what brands you use. And again, I'll link the brands that I recommend below and kind of how much to take. And I'll do the same thing with the peppermint oil. Now, for those of you that are not vegetarian, not vegan, not vegetarian, I'm sure you've all heard that bone broth is extremely helpful. And bone broth actually literally forms a seal in your intestinal lining, which will in turn heal leaky gut. Okay, now aloe does this to a certain extent, but not like bone broth. And peppermint oil will just kind of calm the IBS, but it does not heal leaky gut. As mostly vegetarian, I'll say that I'm, always a little hesitant to recommend something like bone broth, but it really does work. Now, what bone broth do you want to get? You want to get an organic. You definitely want to get an organic bone broth, and you want it to be chicken bone broth. That works a little bit better specifically for gut because of the type of collagen that it has in it. The type 2 has 1, 2, and 3, but the type 2 it's got more of than, say, beef broth does. So that's why chicken bone broth is the way to go. And you're going to do 1 cup twice a day of that. And again, it's going to be organic. You can make it yourself. You can get a brand that I recommend, which I'll link below. But now the thing with bone broth, you want to stop that after about a month. Now with bone broth, you're going to notice a difference in 1 to 2 weeks with that, depending on how bad your IBS symptoms are. You're going to notice a difference with bone broth, pretty significant within 1 week, definitely within 2 weeks. You don't want to do bone broth either for more than a month at a time. You're going to do it for that month, and then you're going to stop. And it really helps to heal leaky gut in that amount of time. And as long as you stick with the foods that you're supposed to eat and avoid the foods you're not supposed to eat, It should not come back except maybe minor stuff under strong periods of stress. Now, why don't you want to do bone broth long term? Well, you're gathering, yes, you're gathering all the nutrients from the bone and all the amino acids, which is a good thing, but you're also gathering all the other things that the bones of, in this case, chickens take in, such as certain toxins, specifically heavy metals. So the bone holds on to specifically lead and arsenic, and so you don't want to do that for a long time. Otherwise, your blood levels of lead and arsenic are going to go up, and we know that we don't want to be high in lead and arsenic. So you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to wait at least, I would say, to be safe, you're probably good with 3 months, but I'd say to be safe, at least 6 months before you do another round of a month of bone broth, just because it does take a while for the body to dissipate the lead and the arsenic collected from the bones. Now, there are things you can do to detoxify your body of heavy metals like lead and arsenic. You can take a zeolite product from a company called Zeo Health. I really recommend that company, Zeo Health, for zeolite. Because they micronize their zeolite, and it absorbs in the body so much better, and it literally pulls out all the heavy metals. It also pulls out radiation. So if you've had radiation scans like CTs, things like that, it's going to help with that kind of stuff too. But it really helps to pull out heavy metals. So maybe do that for a couple months after you do the bone broth. If you're otherwise healthy, you're probably okay. But anyways, a lot of this, once again, is very individual. So some of this, as far as what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating, how you should be healing, depending on what's causing your IBS, is very significant as to which one of these routes that I mentioned that you really want to go. And that's where we would kind of have to have a one-on-one. I mean, I do offer a 30-minute free consultation to anybody that wants it, that needs it, and then we kind of go over what we're gonna do to help you heal. And if you want to then in turn go through one of my programs, we can talk about that too, which are very customized, individualized, specifically for you. But I just wanted to talk just a bit about IBS, because it's so prevalent, and it's so frustrating for doctors to just say, oh, we don't know what causes it, So part of my job is to figure out the cause. Sometimes it is leaky gut, sometimes it's other things. Certain types of organisms in the body could be causing it as well. But again, there's always a stress component associated with it too, which is why hypnotherapy has been clinically proven to work for IBS, for the stress part of the IBS. So that alone, your symptoms will be reduced by at least 50%. I can guarantee you, if you handle the stress part, your symptoms will be relieved by at least 50%. So I know that was a lot of information. There's a lot more on IBS, but I just wanted to kind of give you general information just to kind of get you started and get your mind thinking about it and what you can do about it. But I would definitely still go to any digestive symptoms you're having. Definitely make an appointment with a gastroenterologist. They'll know based on your symptoms kind of what tests to do just to rule out the severe stuff, obviously cancer, things like that. To rule out any of that kind of stuff, or if you have possibly gastroparesis, where your food is just not going through your digestive system fast enough to where it can really metabolize and just kind of get stuck in there. Or you might have the opposite problem. If you're having diarrhea, it might mean you have the opposite problem, which is called dumping syndrome. So there's tests that they can do for that. Gastric emptying study is very, very common for them to do for these types of symptoms, as well as an endoscopy where they put it down your throat, down your esophagus, look in your esophagus, look in your stomach, just to make sure there's nothing severe going on there. Sometimes people have, shown to have ulcers with these symptoms, which a lot of times is caused by H. pylori bacteria, which is a huge problem as well. And which is why everybody should be taking probiotics, definitely, no matter what. Unless you have SIBO, which is a whole other thing, which you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. If you have too much bacteria, which some people do, you don't want to be taking probiotics. But if you don't have SIBO, you definitely always want to be taking probiotics. You can also take prebiotics, fiber that helps feed these probiotics, and you can take what are called postbiotics. So now we're getting into a little more detail here, but again, it just kind of depends on your symptoms, that kind of thing. Obviously, they may also want to, do a colonoscopy if you're 45 years or older. You've never had one, or it's been at least, now their standard is at least 7 years since the last one. But yeah, anyways, that's just kind of scratching the surface. But I just I really wanted to talk a little bit about IBS because, and there's other factors that can happen along with it. So if you have, like I said, acid reflux, GERD, things like that. But in any event, at least that gives you kind of some general info. Definitely, click on the links below for product recommendations and things like that. But as always, if you have any questions at all, reach out to me. I really want to be able to do as many of those free 30-minute consultations as I possibly can. People's health, obviously, especially with the food and the toxins and everything else, is just getting worse and worse, and it's going to continue to get worse unless you know how to protect yourself, right? So that's it for this video, and